Hello farmers, today I want to talk about silage. Why silage is important to farmers. Silage is actually a very good source of feed for our animals, especially for dairy farmers and beef farmers. And it is important because it allows farmers to, have a plan to store their feed and plan for the season. As you can see here, this silage was actually processed last year, I think around June. But you see now it's still there and still a good source of feed. And it's easy. How do you make silage? This is silage from maize. You cut your maize, you chop when they're at milk dough stage. Use that silage cutter and you silo it. If our resources are permitting, you can add a bit of molasses. You chop your silage, you open a silage pit. If you have a tractor, you can bring in a tractor and it rams it down. You spread molasses over it, and the principle is that you cover it so that you exclude completely oxygen from it. What happens after that is that it starts fermenting all that starch. It begins to be turned, into your disaccharides, and it becomes sweet. It becomes fermented. The fiber becomes more usable. So it's a very good source of feed, and especially if you are a farmer, you have red soils that give you good yields. You see, from a hectare, you can actually make up to 40 to 50 tons of silage. And you see, if you have animals like 10, 20, 15 animals from a hectare, you are able to sustain your animals throughout the year with silage. So it's very important. It's one way of actually, putting your feed base in place, and it can stay in the pit like this for more than 6 months. It means you get yourself in a position where you don't panic that probably I don't have feed, and so you can actually improvise, mix it with other feed ingredients like your maize grains, your molasses, all these other ingredients, and it makes a very good source of feed for your animals. And actually it presents a lot of opportunities. If you have small ruminants, like you see your goats, your sheep, they can also be coming and picking it up. When you are feeding silage, it's important that you see you start from one side. You're taking your silage, you start from one side, you only open that one side, and you gradually push it up like this. You don't need to open the whole of it all of a sudden, because we don't want oxygen to get into our silage. So you see this one, because it's properly compressed down. If you open this side, the oxygen will only get probably into 10-15 centimeters, and it cannot go any further. That means you are able to preserve your silage for much longer time. If you don't press it well, there's what we call silage spoiling, where if oxygen enters in, it starts rotting, etc., things like that, and you don't want that to happen. So here, because it's a larger scale, you cut it using a silage cutter. For the small scale farmers, you don't necessarily need to be having a tractor or probably a massive silage cutter. There are small silage cutters, or you can even use machetes to cut your silage and to install it. The principle remains the same. All you need is to be able to cut your maize at milk dough stage, and after that you should be able to have a pit where you put all the stuff in a manner that you exclude as much as possible all the oxygen out of it. So you do that by just ramming. You make sure that you ram. You can use your tires. You can have the logs, heavy logs. You can use them to ram up your silage. The principle is that we don't want oxygen in, so that you see your silage doesn't spoil. And it's a very strategic, especially for the small scale farmers, because once you have your silage, it significantly cuts your feed cost. For dairy farmers, if you have silage, normally there's not much need to be buying these and other feed stuff. Silage alone is able to sustain your dairy animals, and to have your animals giving you good quantities of your milk. So it's not always strategic to do silage for your animals. It has to be determined by the type of soils you have. Because if you have poor soil types, it means the yield you are going to get from there the yields are low, and it doesn't make economic sense to to be doing silage on the soils. But in the event you have very nice red soils that are very fertile, and so where you are guaranteed that your maize yields are high, it's very strategic to do your silage, because we are interested in the yield you get from your maize. If you get little maize from your fields, then definitely your silage is going to be also little. So we want higher yields from the field, and you have more maize, you have more stuff for your silage. For those who want to eat, you would recall that when you are planting your maize for silage, normally the spacing for silage maize is it's a bit it's less than the normal spacing when we are doing maize just for grains. So it's something that's also important, that when you are growing maize specifically for silaging, you can increase your population, your plant population, so that you have more stuff for your silage. What we are interested in is more grains and even more leaves, and the stem, if possible, it must be thick. Thick stems, more leaves, and your grains. It means if you are fertilizing, we encourage putting a bit more nitrogen, which is your top dressing fertilizers, that promote vegetative growth, because we are also very interested in the habits you get from there. Otherwise, once you master that, you are done. It's very good for your animals. It's always important to remember that when you are feeding your animals, when you are using silage, remember to always vaccinate your animals against botulism. Why? Because there's a fermentation process taking place, and so your bacteria, especially your Clostridium species, they like to they do well in the silaging conditions. So it's also very important to remember that every time you're using your silage, you vaccinate your animals against botulism. Otherwise, once you do that, you are good to go perfectly. So now there's a question of what can we use to make silage. We can use maize. This is the most common ingredient for silage. But also remember that you can use sorghum for silage, especially sweet sorghum. It actually gives you even much more nutritional value compared to maize. So if you are at a land where probably sorghum does well, it's very strategic to do your silage using sweet sorghum. You can also mix your maize or your sweet sorghum with even grass. You can actually make silage using your grass. All these grass species we have, the star grass, your kikuyu, and so you can just cut them like you want to, the way we do when we are baling, and you mix with your maize and probably with your sorghum, and you can make your silage. So there are a lot of actually material we can use to make silage. All you do sometimes when the nutritional value of the ingredient you are using is probably a bit low, you aid the quality of your silage by putting a bit of molasses in, or sometimes you can also put a culture, what we call a bacterial culture. It's simply a medium with a bacteria responsible for the fermentation processes. So it simply aids your processes. But otherwise, if everything is done well, you don't need a lot of ingredients when you're making your silage. It should do well as long as you exclude all the oxygen and you make sure that it's well compressed.